And hello there, Peter Mansbridge here. You are just moments away from the latest episode of The Bridge. It's Wednesday, smoke, mirrors, and the truth. Bruce Anderson is away. Rob Russo is sitting in right after this. And hello again, Peter Mansbridge here. I'm in Scotland. Rob Russo is in Ottawa, and we're going to talk initially about the by-elections on Monday night. There were only 4 by-elections. Basically, it ended up exactly the way it started. 2 Liberals won in the seats that they had held before. 2 Conservatives won in the seats they had held before. The NDP vote, kind of inconsequential. They were down a bit, but they weren't their seats. So you'd think, well, there can't be much to talk about on that. But my gosh, a lot of hand-wringing going on, especially by some Conservatives. So the question, Rob, is this all smoke and mirrors, or are they warranted in the hand-wringing?
I love these kinds of stories, Peter. I used to have a lot of let's say vivid discussions with reporters when I was running newsrooms. They would say to me, plane lands, not a big story. Plane crashes, that's a big story. And I would say, whoa, just wait a second, okay? Anybody remember the Gimli glider? Anybody remember the Air Transat player that ran out of fuel over the Atlantic and had to somehow get a couple of hundred people on the ground safely and managed to do so with no fuel in the Azores? This is one of those stories where if you just read the headline, the plane landed safely, but there is a lot of potential crashing going on, and there's a lot of drama. I'm one of these people. I've been on other panels, none of them as august as yours, of course, Peter,
Of course.
where the party people say no, there won't be any surprises, and there haven't been any surprises. But I'm never one of those people when it comes to by-elections in general. The leaders often go in, the parties pour muscle and sinew into it, and they test themes that they're going to use during the general election. And unlike polls, which are national often in nature and theoretical, there's nothing theoretical about the results on an election night, and you're testing it with thousands and thousands of people. And in this case, you're testing it with thousands of people in 3 different regions of the country, 3 different provinces. So you got a pretty good sense of where the country might be, where there are a lot of votes. I say that about by-elections in general. Then I say to the people who say, well, not much can generally happen in a by-election. Really? Nothing momentous happens in by-elections? Anybody remember a woman named Deb Gray suddenly getting elected in Beaver River? And all of a sudden, the Reform Party comes along. And what happened with the Reform Party? Well, it chewed away at the Conservative majority. That was the beginning of it. And a year later, in 1990, in Laurier-Sainte-Marie, the Liberals were supposed to cruise to victory there. And there's a young former Marxist named Gilles Doucette who gets elected. And the Bloc Québécois starts to eat away at the Quebec wing of the Conservative Party. And the next thing you know, Brian Mulroney's gone. He's the Conservative Party, which had won all these majorities, is reduced to 2 seats. So you can have some huge things happen in an election campaign. And I don't say that huge things have happened in this one, but I will tell you that as a result of what we've seen in these by-elections, the federal election right now, if it was held today, would be up for grabs, as opposed to a romp for the Conservatives, which is what a lot of the polls have been showing for the last little while.
I excuse me, don't disagree with any of that. I fully endorse what you've just said. But I'm trying to get at the hand-wringing that's going on by some Conservatives. And I keep underlining some Conservatives because it appears to be the Conservatives who were already feeling that Pierre Poilievre was going too far to the right in his actions and his words and the suggestion of his policies, in an attempt to, kind of block the People's Party progress.
Right. Right.
But they have not wasted any time since Monday night in pushing that line, and that Poilievre has to rethink his his position on a number of subjects, and his position really in terms of campaigning. Do you see that happening?
I think we're talking about Fred Delory, who is the former campaign manager for Aaron O'Toole, who now writes a Substack that has gone from 0 to 100 very, very quickly in terms of how much it's read and how much influence it can have, if not within conservative circles, certainly in the within the rarefied class of the punditocracy. But I don't think and Mr. Delory has written a piece on Substack saying conservatives need to be alarmed about what happened, and we'll come back to that again in a minute. But I don't think it's restricted to just Fred Delory. I've spoken to a member of caucus from the West, a conservative who feels the same trepidation and concern about what he saw on during the elections, during the by-elections. I can tell you that pollsters who have no skin in the game, one of the pollsters that I admire is a guy named Greg Lyle with Innovative Research, and he's a guy who polls for the parties. He's a guy who polls for conservative parties as well, and he has said that the message from the by-elections is that Mr. Poilievre has to go back to the drawing board on some of what he's done since he's assumed the leadership in this past year. So yeah, there is some hand wringing, but I would also put some of those results into context. But first, we might want to talk about the results, okay? Because what they've shown in effect is that the Conservative Party leader, while hanging on to a couple of the by-elections where Conservative seats were up, has failed in one or two areas. And the one that I'm most concerned of, I would be most concerned with, is Winnipeg South Centre. I know that that's a riding that traditionally has gone Liberal, but it did go Conservative when Stephen Harper won his majority in 2011. It is the kind of suburban riding. It's not right downtown that a Conservative leader might want to target, and it's the kind of riding where if he's going to win, he's got to be competitive in these kinds of ridings. At a minimum, he's got to be competitive, Mr. Poilievre. And his vote went down. The Liberals' vote went up across the board. It went up. These are, what are by-elections for? We always say this is a chance for voters to kick a government in the shins. Well, how did the Liberals' score then go up? It's the same thing with Etobicoke Lakeshore last fall. Same thing. Their numbers went up, and in Winnipeg South Centre, the Liberals were beginning to lap the Conservatives. Not just the Conservatives weren't competitive, but they were being lapped there. The vote went up while they're in the middle of all of this scandal and controversy. So I think that's the result that a lot of Conservatives are talking about. That's the one that they're most concerned with.
Now, we should acknowledge too that by-elections traditionally don't have the same number of voters turn out as regular elections, and that was the case here as well. Although some of those spreads though are pretty impressive, and in the Oxford riding in Ontario, which is traditionally a conservative riding for seemingly centuries, with the exception of the time when the Reform and the Conservative Party were splitting the vote and the Liberals end up winning every seat in Ontario. Oxford was one of them. But here, the Conservative vote just, squeaked by would be wrong to say, but it was only, it was less than a double-digit lead over the
right,
which is
right,
kind of unheard for in that particular.
Yeah, that was way closer than it should have been, but I think that one can be explained away because there was a family squabble going on there. The former MP, who was a Conservative, Dave McKenzie, His daughter sought the nomination, and the Pierre Poilievre and the people around him came in and brought in a candidate that they favored. So the party machine really was in favor of one person. So the former MP ended up campaigning for the Liberals. You had that. There are a lot of Mennonites in that riding as well, and they are very conservative when it comes to abortion. And an anti-abortion nominee for the Conservative nomination was prevented from running as well by the center, by the Conservative center. So you had a lot of angry Conservatives who either didn't turn out, who campaigned for the Liberals. Because really, I think since 1935 in Oxford, there have only been two times when the Liberals have won that riding, and that was when the Conservatives were divided. This is a Conservative riding. I think that one was close only because of the family squabble.
Well, you can and they can make any number of different excuses for why the results were the results on Monday night. But
Yep.
the bottom
Yep.
line is still what you said a few moments ago, is the Liberals have been pounded from every direction for months.
Yeah.
They seem to be on the ropes and staggering in the ring. And here they end up increasing their vote. I mean, it is in a way, we use this phrase often in describing Canadian politics, but it's a bit mind-boggling. Now,
yeah, it was, and even in Oxford, the Liberals were campaigning. I mean, they did earn more votes there than they have earned in decades, and so their machine is working. They're out there. They've got a well-oiled machine, and it's working. Chrystia Freeland went into the riding, which was a surprise, and she was knocking on doors. This is not a party that was running away from a fight in a tough riding. They were out there, and they were able to identify their vote and get it out.
Well, one thing that the Liberals have got to be careful of is looking at those results on Monday night and saying, well, you know what? We don't really have anything to worry about. All these polls that come out every week that's saying we're in big trouble. Here we are. We've just seen 4 elections on a miniature scale across the country, and we've done very well on all of them. And we're seeing the historic urban-rural split.
Right.
It does not favor the Conservatives at the end of the day in terms of seats. And so, we don't need to worry about this. That's the
Right.
problem the Liberals could have, is that they just
Yeah.
take for granted that they're okay.
Yeah, I don't think the results show any stampede back towards Justin Trudeau. I think what they show is a real hesitance to run to any alternative. Canadians are saying right now, I'm not sure who I'd want to vote for. There's really not a lot on offer, and I can tell you that Conservatives are in many ways counting on not on that, but they're trying to suppress the Liberal vote. Another Conservative said something very interesting to me when I asked him about the results. Admitted that they weren't as good as they were supposed to be, but Mr. Poilievre's first order of business, and it's the first order of business for any new party leader, is to make sure that they have a firm hold on the base of the party, the operations of the party, the executive of the party. So the job number one was to diminish the People's Party of Canada threat, to try and get those voters to come home. As Mr. Poilievre tells his caucus over and over again, I'm going to bring it home. I'm going to bring that vote home. They're going to come back. So he's, this one Conservative was saying, we're early. We're nowhere near a federal election, although that could change. But his first priority is to try and bring those disaffected Conservatives back. Did he do it? Well, he did it in Portage Lisgar. He didn't do it in Oxford. In Oxford, he made it worse. So there are still some fences to be mended within the Conservative Party itself.
Did he do it in Portage Lisgar? I appreciate that Max Bernier's vote came down from where the People's Party candidate last time had been in Portage Lisgar, but not by a heck of a lot. I mean, he went from 21% of the vote last time round to 17 and change
Right.
this time round.
Yeah, but it's down 20%. Max is the leader of the party, and I think the other results to look at. I think the PPC ran in two of the three other by-elections where they finished behind the Christian Heritage Party. So those votes are beginning to come back to the Conservatives, and you know, there's never going to be a better issue for them than vaccine mandates. That's when the PPC hit their apogee. I don't see another issue like that. And you should also look at how much money they're raising as well. And I think that the PPC is not raising the kind of money that was raising before, whereas the Conservatives are awash in cash. They've set records in the last quarter for fundraising. So that tells you a little bit about where Conservatives are heading. I think they're slowly coming back to the Conservative Party from the PPC, but there's still some fence mending to be done within the Conservative family itself. And I also think that there are people inside caucus, and Mr. Poilievre knows this, who are watching him as well. The Conservative Party has effectively become a one and done party. Andrew Scheer got one chance, he was done. Aaron O'Toole got one chance, and he was done. Mr. Poilievre might be getting his hands on the executive right now, but if he fails to knock off a leader who has all the bumps, scrapes, and bruises on him that Justin Trudeau has, who is seeking a historic fourth mandate, if he fails to do that, I don't think that the one and done thing is gonna be over. I think that the Conservatives will once again turn on their leader.
And the major challenge still for the Conservatives is they've got to, it's one thing to say they're pushing back the threat from the PPC, but that's not their problem. They're winning those seats anyway, and they're winning with
Yeah.
big majorities, which is part of the reason why they do well in national polls. Where they're not winning, and where this once again showed they're not winning, is in urban areas in the country, and they have to
Right.
break through there, or they're never going to accomplish their goal.
Yeah, and again, let's go back to that danger for the Liberals. There is not an appetite for the current alternative, but now that Mr. Poilievre is beginning to get that PPC vote home, let's see if he puts a little varnish on what has been, in effect, an unvarnished, stout right-wing conservatism. Let's see. I don't expect a pivot. That's just not going to happen. But in terms of the issues that are debated by Mr. Poilievre as he seeks these votes, I mean, really, a by-election about whether or not somebody attended the World Economic Forum when the fangs of a recession are beginning to bite into the backs of Canadians. We all know, and those who support Mr. Poilievre know this as well, and they say this, that that's not going to be an issue during the next election unless the other parties try to make it that. What he needs to talk about is the economy, is housing, is interest rates, it's dreams that are being delayed, if not dashed, across the country. Those are issues that the Conservatives do well on.
Okay, before we leave politics, I want to mention something else that happened in the last couple of days. And it was on stage in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. And it was quite the moment. You had one current prime minister and one former prime minister on the stage, Justin Trudeau and Brian Mulroney, the last prime minister to win back-to-back majority governments. He ended up leaving at the end of the second majority government, and his party got wiped out, partly due to some of his maneuvering in that second majority term. But nevertheless, he's up there in the in the hierarchy of Canadian prime ministers in terms of their records. So Brian Mulroney is introducing on stage Justin Trudeau, and it's a remarkable speech because he basically praised Justin Trudeau, and at one point said, listen, Justin Trudeau's leadership is going to be remembered not for the trash and the rumors, but for leadership. And he talked specifically about the pandemic, but not exclusively about the pandemic. But there were a lot of people gobsmacked by that, and not just conservatives. Some liberals were gobsmacked by it too. What do you make of that?
You know, we both covered Brian Mulroney, and we really enjoyed covering Brian Mulroney for a variety of reasons. One of the things about Brian Mulroney was he was never dull, and he gave, as we say in the business, great quote. He had this love-hate relationship with the media as well. He loved them, and they hated him back at times, and he could never understand why the love was not requited. So I begin by saying that he was a lot of fun to cover if you were a political reporter, and you're getting a sense of why. He's also a guy who knows a little bit about persevering through pummeling poll numbers. Right now, that Mr. Trudeau's national polling numbers are not very good, and Mulroney knows a fair bit about that. He got down to, I think, 11 or 12% in the polls. But if you take some of the things that he said, some of the quotes that he said, and just transpose Mr. Trudeau's name in them with Mr. Mulroney's name in them, you're going to get some of the basic elements of Brian Mulroney's stump speech these days. And a stump speech is the parts of the speech that are always repeated, no matter what the topic is about. There was one quote in particular that I've heard over and over again in Mr. Mulroney's speeches, and while it was praising Mr. Trudeau, Brian Mulroney said, "History is only concerned with the big ticket items that have shaped the future of Canada." And he said that Mr. Trudeau, in renegotiating the NAFTA with a truculent Donald Trump, had achieved something very big. But this is the theme of Brian Mulroney's post-political career. That leadership is you get leadership to do things, and that he's accused people, including Stephen Harper, of not doing big things with government. But it's also, what he's saying is, I did big things. I paid the price for it. So there's a fair amount of that going on. But it's still really interesting to hear this campaign, which has now gone on for 30. It's been 30 years since Brian Mulroney left office, and his legacy is mixed, and it is controversial when we think about his association with Karl-Heinz Schreiber and others. But he's still trying to shape the opinion of journalists and historians when it came to Brian Mulroney's time in office, and that's what I hear when I hear him praising Justin Trudeau. He also met with Poilievre last fall. I had dinner with him and Mr. Mulroney, his wife Mila, which is a rare thing for his wife Mila to get involved in a political dinner like that. And he praised Poilievre, but he did warn him, as he praised him as a good listener. He said he listened to me, but I also said to him, the history of Canada shows you can't be too far to the left, you can't be too far to the right. Canada is a country of the broad center. So yeah, he's a very good listener. And here's what I told him if his ears were actually open.
I wonder, do you think he would have? I don't think Brian Mulroney has to fly anything past anybody before he says it. He's very focused. I'm sure he knew for some time that he was going to say what he said in introducing Justin Trudeau. But do you think he gave a heads up to either Poilievre directly or his office that he was going to do that?
I doubt it. I doubt it. He does say what he wants. He does remain a member of the Conservative Party. He continues to support the Conservative Party, but no, not at all. I can tell you, he loves being consulted, and he still enjoys the limelight, right? He is still capable of turning a phrase, delivering a speech with wit. But I always find that at the end of almost every speech, there is something there about the legacy of Brian Mulroney himself that's really at the heart of the speech. So this is a man who has never really stopped campaigning about the legacy of Brian Mulroney.
So in some ways, when he used that phrase, he's going to be remembered for his leadership, not the trash and the rumors. One could argue he was also talking about himself.
substitute Justin Trudeau, substitute Brian Mulroney for Justin Trudeau, and I've heard those lines in his speeches since then. And to be fair, he does believe that that's what leadership is about. That people do remember the big things. And his hero is Sir John A. Macdonald, and he often uses Sir John A. Macdonald as an example, and says people will remember him as the guy who stitched Canada together, who was there when the last spike was driven in. And what he doesn't say is he won't be remembered for calling up the head of the railway and say, please send me another $10,000. I need the money desperately.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Sir John A. because not far from where I am here in northeastern Scotland, on the coast of the North Sea, where I've been swimming every day for the last week. Not far from here, I'd say about less than half an hour's drive, is the location where the Macdonald family's residence was in the early 1800s, kind of a farmhouse. Now, Sir John A. himself didn't live there. His father lived there, and he came back and visited his grandparents more than a few times. They moved, I think, to Glasgow. They had moved to Glasgow. But he came up, and what's interesting is it's a kind of a back highway that runs through near that area, and there's a little sign at the along the highway saying family home of Canada's first prime minister, turn here. And you travel about 5 or 8 minutes, and then you find this kind of mound of rocks, and another sign saying this was it, and it was John A. Macdonald. It's kind of funny to be over here and see that, especially at a time when there is a lot of rethinking going on about Macdonald and other key figures of the time, and about their behavior and their beliefs. But there it is, a little slice of our history, and it's just this kind of pile of rocks and a Canadian flag flying there.
It's worthy of a picture, and you should post that. I imagine you're one of the very few Canadians who actually get there.
Probably. I wonder too of the Canadians that the highway that I'm talking on, it's not really a highway. It's kind of mostly single track going across Scotland, but it runs from east to west. So you cover the whole country in less than 2 hours, and it's along that particular roadway that this happens. And I'm sure even many Canadians who pass by there just keep on driving. They don't stop. They should stop. I mean, it is a slice of history there, and no matter how you feel about the guy, he was there at the beginning of a country we love. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, something totally different, not about politics, but a dilemma in many ways for journalists, news editors, and those in charge of newsrooms, of which you have been as a former bureau chief for CBC in Ottawa, former bureau chief for Canadian Press in Ottawa, and worked in Washington, worked in Quebec City. The list goes on. The guy's a legend. Anyway, we'll take a quick break and back with a totally different kind of subject right after this. And welcome back. Peter Mansbridge here with Rob Russo, sitting in for Bruce Anderson, Smoke, Mirrors, and the Truth, the Wednesday episode of The Bridge. You're listening on Sirius XM, channel 167, Canada Talks, or on your favorite podcast platform, or as this is a Wednesday, you can watch us on our YouTube channel. All right, ever since I was a wee tyke, I've always been fascinated by the story of the Titanic. I mean, we came to Canada on a ship from Europe in 1954. And I think that was probably one of the first times I heard the story about the Titanic, especially as we kind of passed that area. And we came over in April too, which is kind of a tricky month with icebergs and all that. Anyway, been fascinated by the Titanic story, and as a result, was fascinated by the movie, was fascinated by the discovery of the Titanic. Love listening to Jim Cameron talk about the dives that he took down to the Titanic as part of the filming of the movie. and have been equally fascinated this week by one of the tourist submersibles that go down to visit the shipwreck of the Titanic at a cost of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per person. Anyway, that submersible has been lost. There's some encouragement today that they've heard some tapping sounds. And as we record this, that's kind of where we're at. They're running out of oxygen, or at least they think the oxygen supply will be gone in another 24 to 30 hours. So none of those are good signs. But we're talking about 5 people, right? And so journalists around the world have been confronted with this story versus a lot of other stories that are out there. I mean, this story started to happen on the same weekend as more than 40 kids were slaughtered at a school in northern Uganda. We talked to Sam Nutt about this the other day on the bridge because she's over there. That's a horrific story and tells us something about what's going on in different parts of Africa. This appears to have been an ISIS-inspired attack to slaughter these kids. Anyway, you've got this choice: whether we do this story or do we do this story over here about the millionaires and billionaires who are on this sub going down to see the Titanic. And there really is no argument here as to which has been getting more play. The question is that right? Or how do we understand, or how should we understand those choices that are being made by everyone, including by me? You know, I'm not trying to say, oh, no, I wouldn't do it. It's just that is what's been happening. But Rob, talk to me about the choice that's being made here, and
Sure, sure.
how you defend
I,
it.
I, I think I think there's a fundamental difference in the two stories, and in the two stories as news. First of all, number one, in terms of the kids who were slaughtered, we're talking about a fait accompli, something that's already happened, and horrific as it may be. There's nothing that anybody can do about it. We all regret it. We all wonder what is going on. We all wonder what is happening with the world, and that's the discussion that happens as a result of going with a story like that. The story of trying to rescue the Titan and the 5 people on board is something that may yet be a happy ending story. Everybody's hoping for a happy ending story. And you know, if you look at network news now, particularly US network news, all of them end their newscasts with an inspiring story, something that they hope will bring people back to the next newscast, because people are looking for hope in bleak times, and they are looking for some sort of inspiration. They are looking for some reason to keep going during tough economic times, during times when democracies seem to be polarized. And so there's this element of the possibility of a happy ending with the rescue of the Titan. The other thing is, you know, without a doubt, there's a measure of, I would say, on the edge of your seat, if not entertainment, drama. But I'll draw you a parallel. It's the old spy movie or drama movie cliche. You set a clock in the bottom of the screen with a countdown that's going to take us to the destruction of something. And in this story, in the story of the Titan, the clock is ticking, and the drama is building. This happened on Sunday. It got very little mention in Sunday night newscasts. It wasn't prominently displayed on the front of newspapers or on websites on Sunday night. But as we get closer to the moment when those on board are going to be out of oxygen, then the coverage has ramped up. So that's the equivalent of that, you know, that nuclear detonation kind of ticking a time clock in the bottom of a screen. And that's irresistible to editors, it's also irresistible to a lot of people who consume media. But I think the big difference is that a lot of people are still hoping for a happy ending, and that people are working towards a happy ending. And you've got also this international effort that's being poured in. This is not just a Canadian story. It's not just an American story. It's now involving elements from around the world. To say nothing of the fact that we're talking about a story associated with another story that has fascinated people for over a century, and that's a story of the Titanic.
You know, it's funny because you mentioned the name of the submersible as the Titan, which is accurate. But when you flash through all the stories, the name that gets mentioned more than the Titan is the Titanic, right? Or the
Right.
destination for where the Titan was going. It is a huge story here in Europe as well, especially in the UK, and it's all connected for the Titanic and
Right.
the irony that these five people are missing in the very same waters and the same site as the Titanic went down at the cost of, what was it, 1,500 lives. And still, as you say, emotes feelings on the part of so many people. And this is, intersected with that.
And who was aboard the Titan? Who is aboard the Titan? It's rich magnates who can afford to spend a couple $100,000 it takes to go down there. And who was aboard the Titanic? This was the maiden voyage of a luxury liner, and some of the biggest names in European and American capitalist royalty were aboard the Titanic as well. So there is some irony in the fact that both of these vessels, who share at least a part of a name, find themselves in very, very difficult straits with some of the same kinds of passengers aboard as well.
It's something about summer too that brings us these kind of stories that can last. They're almost a way, as tragic as this one may be, it's almost a way of deflecting us from all the other stories that have much more import in terms of our lives, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Uganda, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's house prices. It reminds me of the summer of 2001,
Mm-hmm.
up until 9/11, the
Right.
biggest story that summer. And it kept going almost day after day, week after week throughout that summer. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. I think it was the shark. Was that the summer of the shark?
It was the
I
summer
was
of the
I
shark.
was living in the United States then. Yeah. And it was bizarre, but it was the summer of the shark, and nobody remembers that, of course. Now, I'll give you another parallel. I was also living in the United States in 1999 when John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane went down and disappeared in the waters off Cape Cod, and it wasn't found for a few days, and the entire country was gripped. Um, and it also had the echoes of a tragedy that had befallen his father, of course, who was, born and raised in Boston as well. So I thought of that when I heard about this story, and how history can have tragic echoes sometimes, and how the United States was transfixed, and the world quite truly was transfixed. That the little boy they saw saluting their dad uh, during that funeral parade uh, was now missing and presumed gone as well.
In terms of the 2001 example, um, in August, at the height of shark frenzy, the beginning of August, um, President Bush was warned by his CIA director and others in the security and intelligence area, national security advisor, um, that something big was coming, that they'd heard.
Right, right,
What's that term where they, the chatter? They'd heard chatter.
right.
Something big was coming, and it was going to be on American soil. And basically, nothing was done.
Yeah.
They basically ignored that. And I think some of that had got out, actually, but it got swamped by sharks.
Yeah. While people were afraid to go into their swimming pools, Muhammad Atta and 18 other air pirates were making final preparations. We're shutting down their leases. We're going over airline manuals. We're doing everything they could to prepare. Just a few weeks away to bring the U.S. economy to its knees, and to completely overturn the U.S. security apparatus. It's unfathomable when you think about it.
Well, let's hope nothing like that's going on here right now. But we will dial in, as we always do, most of us, to these stories that tug at our emotions. And yet we can't forget about the other big stories that are happening that are important to our world, and perhaps a lot more important to our world than things like the Titanic exploration. Having said that, we do hope that there's a happy ending in some fashion to this story. Rob, it's been great to have you with us. It's always great when you join the bridge, and especially Smoke, Mirrors, and the Truth. Appreciate you filling in for Bruce. Take care.
I appreciate you having me on, Peter. I enjoyed it.
All right, that's it for this day. I'm Peter Mansbridge. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with Your Turn and the Random Ranter. Friday, Bruce will be back and joining Chantal Hébert for our final good talk before the summer break. That's it for now. We'll talk to you again in 24 hours.